There's more developers in China than the US and EU combined, right?
Yeah.
So, and they have the same tools and they have the same amount of time now in development. Yeah, so we've been told by the heads of some pretty big Chinese video game companies, choose China. I've been told by almost every single executive in the West I've ever talked to, like, this cannot be done. That everybody is starting to acknowledge that AAA, outside of, like, the only moat in Western game dev that I believe still stands is IP. And so everything that's not protected by IP is now at risk.
And if I'm stuck on something and I just get mired down into it, it actually does sap my creativity because, one, you start to have a weird relationship with the thing you're working on and you kind of like end up hating it.
My argument for our studio going around that process is the general gist is that you need a team that comes together and builds games for a certain number of years before they start forming, storming, norming, performing, as it were, in gaming takes years.
We've all consumed 10 million stories and listened to 10 million songs in our life, but very few people have actually tried to sit down and write a story or a song.
Rob, Clark, how's it going?
We're doing well, I think.
You can't complain. Could, but nobody cares.
You always complain. I appreciate you. No. I'm glad it's going well,
sir. Yeah.
So quick intro for you both, and I think just really like the studio itself. Yeah, Rob, who are you? Clark, who are you? Like, what's Rising Tide?
So Rising Tide is a collaboration it's founded by myself and my partner Ash Shui, who, along with this team of directors from an unannounced AAA Soulslike, and me from Activision, left to create a new independent AAA, AA, mostly action role playing content studio, aiming for content that inherently from prototype appeals to both Eastern and Western audiences. Ash comes from 25 years of game development experience. I come from quite a weird background of first U.S. Navy and then Activision. But together, we think that we have the DNA from the start, from the founding members, to create a new type of studio that leverages all the current trends that you're probably going to talk about in this podcast, but also that can create a new type of creative content that bridges that gap that everyone has historically told us is impossible to do, but we think that we're going to prove with our first title that we can do it. That's what we're up to.
Nice. Clark.
Yeah, so I have considerably less games experience than Rob and Ash, unfortunately, but I come from a screenwriting background, and I've always been a big gamer, and I've always been interested in kind of making the switch into games. And through a conversation with Rob, this opportunity came up that's just, I mean, really exciting to me. This opportunity to try to write for something for both markets and kind of hit this target that hasn't been hit before, just the type of challenge that gets me going. So, it was something too good to pass up.
Awesome. All right. I want to start with where I usually start with people, which is state of game dev. This is just like looking at the games industry overall. And Clark, I'm going to actually broaden this because, you might be less in touch with that, but just like entertainment, right? As an industry, how do we see entertainment moving? How do we see game dev moving in our sort of current world? What are you guys seeing out there?
The state of game dev is pretty well. I'm going to do a shout out here, but Richard Brown, who I think is in front of your podcast, he put out a couple synopses on LinkedIn that were really, like, I think, cut to the bone. Because I think at game dev, we tend to talk a lot, but if people can distill it down to a couple of key points, I think that everybody's starting to acknowledge that AAA, outside of, like, the only moat in Western game dev that I believe still stands is IP. And so everything that's not protected by IP is now at risk. I think that from a capital formation perspective, things are still broken. And when I say broken, I mean there was a huge wave of influx of capital in 2020, 2021 that it immediately rushed back out when a lot of those projects didn't pan out. A lot of the traditional capital formation structures of publishing and other forms of investment haven't found their legs in the new environment with changes to distribution, marketing, development, as well as, like, I think just general trepidation from a lot of the industry top people on what the future is. Like, Ash and I saw kind of the current uncertainty and the shifts, especially the capital formation front, years ago we knew we had to go outside the industry to form the capital necessary to get to, let's say, vertical slice or even to full release if necessary. And so my advocacy to folks, especially the ones that listen to this podcast, because I think that's pretty similar to me and Clark, our audience, is don't wait for the industry to finish changing to do what you need to do. You need to start forging a trail for your path however you can. And that means don't rely on the industry, quote unquote, to wait for it to stabilize to fund your idea. Go out and start doing it. The people who are getting funding, who are getting deals, etc., are the ones who are just doing it. And I'm happy to plug a few people we met at Dice that I'm very impressed by on the podcast. But with that, I'll be quiet and let Clark talk about general entertainment.
Yeah, I'm gonna validate my own decisions here in jumping into the games industry. But I mean, I think interactivity is huge. There's just such a demand for our attention and a competition for our attention and our entertainment minutes, hours, whatever that we spend, that, I think, and you see it, that traditional movies and TV are lagging. And even if you look at where sports leagues are going, which are, the standard of entertainment, I mean, they're moving to like live betting during games. You've got, who knows if we'll catch on, but you've got the Apple Vision, new ways to feel like you're more a part of an NBA game when you watch it. The old way of sitting down in front of a TV and passively consuming is becoming, I think, less and less relevant. Well, it doesn't compete the way that scrolling or doing more interactive forms of entertainment, they're just grabbier, and we're hardwired to want to do those more. So yeah, I think it's nothing new to you guys in the game industry, but yeah, interactivity is just huge, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting. I actually really appreciate you kind of zooming out, because it is something that TV shows, 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I mean, I remember like way back in the day, I'm dating myself here, but I watched a show called JAG, the U.S. Navy show. But it was like a really cool show. And I remember it like came out once a week. And while there's a nostalgia part of me that was like, we're going to watch JAG if we can, or something like that on CBS, and everything has shifted so much to like the whole series drops at once. All these different things are now the norm. And that old style of show still exists for some part of the market, but it's shrinking. Like, and I don't have cable. I don't have anything that like, I just actually did a harder cut on even my streaming service. Cause like I'm paying every month for this and I just don't use it. Like I don't, and why would I, with the plethora of free options or game options out there, that like, if I'm going to spend casual time, dude, I'll be on YouTube and playing a game. Like I was just playing Balatro a ton. It's like this just very interesting game, and you can just like be sitting in the game and just watching like something casually on the side, and it's great, like kind of. But I appreciate that perspective around TV's struggling, movies are struggling. There's been a shift, it's continuing to shift. Interactivity is up,
and they're not going to go away totally. I mean, people still and go to art museums and watch plays, but just the importance. No, seriously. I mean, it's just
I love that.
But yeah, but I think they've lost the kind of like position as the pinnacle of our cultural conversations, the water cooler talk, and well, not totally, but like you said, the market is shrinking.
Yeah. Well, the reason I laughed is because I had not considered the idea that in another 50 years or 100, I don't know, that, people make these boutique things called movies, and you go to like the theater that still has a movie player. It's like, oh yeah. And like everybody gets their best dress, like their suit on, and they go and they're like, we're going to go watch a movie about World War IV or something like that. And it's like, yeah, nobody does that anymore. That's not how, and so anyway, it just hit me like, wow, what is weird possible futures. Okay. So Rob, you already kind of mentioned this a little bit or alluded to it. You've taken a different approach than a lot of studios have in the last few years that did try to do more. Oh, we're going to go the VC route. We're going to the publishing route. We're going to make a big game. We're going to, have a particular audience in mind that's probably either Western or Eastern and not both. And you looking at all this, and along with Ash, we're like, no. We can do this. We can hit both things. We can, I mentioned earlier that like, your first game's your break even. And the second one, you were like, no, to the moon. We're going to the moon. We're winning on this. So what led to the approach you've taken?
One was capital formation. Because you mentioned venture capital in other forms. I want to touch on that. That could be an entire hour we could talk about. Clark gets bored by when I talk about that. Two is like the approach of how you create an intellectual property, I think is what you're talking about. KCD 2 comes out and it does a lot better than KCD 1. Instead of a year, it takes two weeks to get to, a month to get to 2 million, as opposed to 2 million for 1 year. And the benefits of building a team over the course of time. And of course, layering studios with Divinity, Original Sin, and all the way up to Baldur's Gate 3. I am glad that the powers that be are finally starting to recognize that building an intellectual property takes time. However, my argument for our studio going around that process is the general gist is that you need a team that comes together and builds games for a certain number of years before they start performing. Forming, storming, norming, performing, as it were, in gaming takes years. The fortunate part about our studio is we basically took the directors of an unannounced AAA Soulslike game and put them on a game that's very similar to what they were previously doing. Just the perspectives changed. And all of us are extremely aligned with what we're trying to build. Now, that being said, I think that Project Great Wall 2, whatever we call that, will do better than Project Great Wall. However, I when I give my pitch to people, there's a base, high, very high hits, right? And in Western fundraising, and we can talk about this too, you're supposed to give the 5% scenario, you're supposed to give like the you do really well scenario in pitching. In China, conversely, you're supposed to give the 50% scenario. So that's been interesting to see as a cultural difference. But you can always look at the comparables and how they do. But like my baseline that I pitch people is we do as well as Dead Cells, which we can go into detail on like the comparables and stuff like that. But I think that to the point about building an IP in video games, you need a team that builds its DNA over time. I'm trying to leapfrog that by taking all the directors previous that have worked together on average 5 years and some as long as 15 years, and put them to work on what they actually want to build. And so I'll pause there, but we can go into great detail on the fundraising aspect or the team aspect in more questions.
Yeah. Well, so as I hear that, it's yes, we're a new studio as a business entity. The relationships and collaboration of the team pre-existed today by a significant margin. And that means that like, this isn't like a new team coming together who doesn't know how to work together. This is a team who's worked together in various capacities with a vision of what they were trying to produce. It's just that we're taking that outside of that environment where they were doing that. So you had this team, you had this product idea. You also then went like, because you could have, now obviously part of this is the collaboration between you and Ash being the founders, but you could have gone like, hey, let's just do this in China, right? We're just going to do a startup in China. We're going to hit Chinese market. We're going to hit, let's say, whatever dominant Eastern themes or Chinese themes for what a game might be. And we'll worry about the Western market if that becomes a thing later. Or we could have gone Western, right? Like it's the Western with some really cool, smart, dev cost cheaper, not on the coast of the United States. So like we'll be not there, and we'll be able to develop this thing for a lower price point. And now, boom, we ship that to the West. We win, right? And you bridged it. You said like, no, we're doing both. We're hitting both. And you even mentioned in the lead up to this that like there are people who are like, no, you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, so we've been told by the heads of some pretty big Chinese video game companies, choose China. I've been told by almost every single executive in the West I've ever talked to, like, this cannot be done. By the way, it's very hard to do. However, I believe there have already been antecedents to us, like miHoYo, has hit that mark, although they kind of, so I'm going to take a little aside here. To date, every single Chinese success in the West, or just kind of big successes, has had a but afterwards, right? So miHoYo, obviously the but was, okay, well, they're in Chinese Chaoxi. They're copying Breath of the Wild, or they're copying Persona, right? And just in like putting a Chinese live ops thing on top of it, right? You could say the Black Myth Cool, that it's failed in the West, bro. I mean, I was the most prominent arguer that failed in the West, but it's essentially a Chaoxi, a copycat of God of War plus Sekiro, some other things. So there's always been a comma but with every Chinese success internationally. And I'm not here to accuse the entire world of being racist or whatever, but like I do think that there's a general fear in the West of China in the video game industry. And I think Marvel Rivals, I know we're not going to talk about it, but there's always kind of trying to be an explanation. And it's not without merit, because I'm friends with all these like luminaries on LinkedIn that like have 25 years of development experience. All of the points they make are correct. However, I believe, and we can go into the details about why me and Ash thought when we came up with the idea and how it came to formation. But I believe that everyone's wrong that's been giving us that feedback. I think you can create intellectual property that appeals to both. I think there's been lots of examples. I mean, Blue Eye Samurai, Ghost of Tsushima. My job is essentially to curate, and my job is to sell the studio and sell the idea. But I think there's plenty of rejoinders, parries, riposts or whatever to that argument. But that has been the going argument in the game industry for 5 years now, that China can't create things on its own that appeal to the West. And my entire kind of reason, my justification of my existence of my company is to dispute that fact. So,
well, you also see games. You do see games going west to east, and I'll say I worked on League of Legends. Now, some people might say, well, League of Legends is not as big in the West as it is in the East, and that's totally like a fair thing to say. Simultaneously, it's not like it was a failure in either place. And you could say the same thing about like World of Warcraft, right? It's not, so going back, and I know Blizzard IP obviously carried a lot, but like, shoot, StarCraft was a profitable franchise, and that would have happened even if Korea hadn't taken off like it did. It was still considered a high quality product. And so anyway, and the other thing too that I would say, I haven't been involved in a lot of these conversations, but but like that's just this cloned. And I go like, wait a minute. You're telling me that and then perhaps this is what you're saying, where like, hey, you've got some motivated reasoning going on. Isn't that what so many games are trying to do? Right? Like what is Warzone but like, oh, we cloned PUBG, or like what and again, I think it's obviously not a pure clone, but it's Black Myth Wukong is a unique experience from those reference points. And we're, like God of War, sure. Is Horizon Zero Dawn like God of War? In some ways it is, and so you look at this and I just go like, yeah, isn't that what we're all doing? Like Rust came out and now there's 74,000 survival crafting games in the market. And a lot of them still have you running up to a tree and punching it with your bare hands at the start, right? Does that like, I don't know. It's interesting to me that someone would use it as an argument when I'm like, frankly, we're all doing that. We're all combining things and trying new ideas and putting little innovations on things that we know resonated with players.
Well, I'd love to take the beginning of this and then punt over to Clark the following question, that like nothing new under the sun, that like there really are not that many original
ideas. That's exactly
ideas.
what I was just thinking. Yeah.
But what I'm going to say is, okay, I'm like the biggest, been going to I wanted to work at Activision Blizzard so I could work at Blizzard. The irony is that I mostly worked at Activision and then ended up becoming like an Activision true believer. But Blizzard's whole motto was take a genre and then make the genre leader of it. So World of Warcraft is a copy of EverQuest and RuneScape, Ultima, Dark Ages of Camelot. Okay, StarCraft, plenty of real-time strategy prior to StarCraft, right?
I think Dune would be. Yeah.
Overwatch was
Enforcers.
didn't invent the genre of the hero shooter. It certainly was a pretty nascent genre, but Hearthstone, all these things are just Blizzard takes a core idea and then makes it the genre leader, right? That will, that was their kind of raison d'etre. And Activision, I mean, there's plenty of things it takes from Fortnite, PUBG, Battlefield. I would argue that argument in general has gone out the window in the last 10 years, especially since games as a service. Now it's a very pilloried term, but when games as a service came around, this, Bench, you're sitting in a meeting and the product manager or the lead designer or whatever is saying, okay, we're going to be the this of this. We're going to take this thing and we're going to do this riff. Like that, I believe is almost like dishonest argument. And so that's being applied in mass to a lot of Chinese developments. And I think unfairly, but I do think that China does still have, I mean, look, you look at Japan and to some extent you look at South Korea. I mean, there are some creative, really out there, creative, innovative stuff going on in Japan and South Korea. And I think juxtaposed against those, they all get kind of lumped, those three get lumped together, China, South Korea, Japan. I do think that China has yet to make an international title that has the creativity of a From Software or a Nintendo or to even some extent, some of the Korean studios. And so I think I don't think it's a fair argument, but I think that everybody's going to keep saying that until there's something truly innovative, but it's only a matter of time. I mean, there's more developers in China than the US and EU combined, right?
Yeah.
So, and they have the same tools and they have the same amount of time now in development. I mean, they came up with mobile free to play, right? But now they've gotten the tools and the wherewithal to make leading AAA platform, console PC. And with that, I'll kick it over to Clark for
Clark, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think you pretty much covered it, but excuse me. Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're all repurposing the same old stories and entertainment, and you're just finding ways to subvert it and try to put your own fingerprint on it. But that's actually a good thing for us. I mean, I think that if anything, it validates the mission of the company, which is to create this game that's going to resonate equally in opposite sides of the world. And it's because stories, and really it comes down to human experience, and for all the cultural differences and the contextual differences, human experience is pretty much the same for everybody around the world. We feel the same emotion, so it's just tapping into that. And to me, if it's anything, like you brought up Black Myth, which I really loved playing, but I just felt like they dropped me in. They started using words like Yao Guai or this or that, and without any context, and I just felt like I was drowning immediately. So I kind of from the narrative. As far as like the gameplay, I wasn't, sure, you can call it God of War or this or that, but I wasn't really thinking that when I was playing. I was just having fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for us, and the way to kind of actually bridge the gap is to just make sure that we're giving the necessary cultural context to everything we're doing for both markets, so that whoever picks it up is able to feel like they're following along. And that's it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I also just that phrase, like, there's nothing new under the sun. I'm a big fan of that. Generally speaking, because it does feel like we're constantly recombining and just retrying things, that then like
millennia.
Yeah. Well, and it was also, I think, even in our recent times, not to go too far into the Marvel Rivals, but like Concord launched a few months before that, and everybody was like, well, that's because hero shooters are dead and it's a dead genre and no one will play a hero shooter ever again. And it was like, no, it just wasn't executed or wasn't marketed, or like we could talk about what the issues were there. It was like Marvel Rivals landed, and I think, to your point, Rob, there's this thing you could do on Steam around a game, and you can see like, hey, when is your peak? When is your peak? When is your drop? And if you see a peak around 9 p.m., Eastern time, that probably means that you're primarily hitting a Western audience. And if you see a peak around 3 a.m., that probably means you're hitting an Eastern audience, generally speaking. And it was interesting because Marvel Rivals and Delta Force came out at the same time, and Delta Force did actually pretty well, did better than I expected it to. Marvel Rivals did way better than I expected it to. But Marvel Rivals also was interesting because it's a Western audience. Like from when you watch the peak numbers, it's played primarily by people in the West. And so that's where a lot of you see a higher peak at the 9 p.m. than you do at the 3 a.m. And Delta Force is the other way. You see the peak at 3 a.m. And so interestingly, like Delta Force is almost a Battlefield game, but built for the Eastern audience. And it's funny when I look at it, I see some of that and some of the art and some of the different, like, just stylistic choices. But I played it and it was like, yeah, this isn't bad. It's not, I didn't like the maps a ton. But like overall, I was like, yep, this is feels like a Battlefield game to me, and it just hit a different audience based on marketing and all these different things. And so yeah, it'd be interesting to see one where you just sort of had that flat line or something like that, where it's just like, hey, we're equally hitting, both audiences with this.
I mean, just really quickly, like we expect 70% of our audience is probably going to come from mainland China, right? Like it's just natural by, the pricing differential and by like just the content. But to me, a 3070, even a 2080, like East Asia West, or 80-20 East Asia West, to me is a victory. The more I can push up the ladder number, the more I justify my existence in the industry. So but yeah, we're trying to subvert that. I mean, again, look, only a Black Myth Wukong can get 2.5 million CCUs because the most common language on the platform is now simplified Chinese, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's silly for people to like look too much at like the CCUs, but like, and you can define victory however you want, but why not take advantage of both, right?
Yeah.
Best
Yeah.
you can.
One thing I think, as we do go into more of this global world where a significantly larger number of both players and money spent are coming from the non-Western markets, what is the difference you see between the Western and the Eastern player? Like if you were to make generalized, or like, this is stereotypical perhaps, but just like generally, how do you think about appealing to those two audiences? Because I know that there are differences there, even though we all love great games. It does seem like there are differences in what those different spaces gravitate towards. And that's, I think, true. You could probably, again, further subdivide that, but Eastern, Western, like, what do you see as the difference in the player?
Yeah, so I'm going to constrain this narrowly to our product, which is an action role-playing isometric roguelike, right? It's like a Hades, No Rest for the Wicked. There was a study I read at Activision. We did all of our internal studies, and then there's external stuff, but player motivations, right? And in the West, you have a pretty normative, there's like 8, I don't know off the top of my head, but there's like 8 player, there's competition, there's challenge, there's
Social,
exploration, yeah. There's 8 of these things, right? And in the West, there's an even distribution across all of the 8 whatever's. In China, it's like challenge and competition, right? And so, interestingly, I still remember like one of my first slides from talking to our lead designer. This is like 2 years ago almost, and I was showing him like difficulty as a like difficulty of our game versus time, right? So I keep talking to my lead producer, our producer Jiawei, and I'm like, stop making it so China difficult. I call it like China difficulty, right? Like Black Myth Wukong is China difficult, right? Like a lot of Westerners can't get past like the first boss, right? The first major chapter boss, right? Whereas Chinese, I'm sure there's that famous Steve He, if you know him, Steve He, the YouTube speaker, who talks about adding Asian difficulty to video games, right?
Yep.
That's true. Like that is very true. Chinese, Koreans, they like challenge. Westerners have so for example, in our game, like I think about as like the product manager, as it were, like difficulty versus time. Like the first 5 hours of the game, you don't want to be too difficult. You want, like, let's say, the way I think of it is like, 60% of our players should be able to beat the Rainmaker on their first try, right? Turns out from testing, it's pretty hard right now.
It took me 4, I think. It took me 4, and I needed the gun. I used the gun a lot. Actually, I thought the gun was really cool.
You like the gun?
I like the gun.
The gun.
Yeah.
Brief aside here. Saturday, one of our board members, we had his son play, and I'm just a brief aside here. The neuroplasticity of Gen Alpha is like scary. Like we're doomed. I'm a big doomer on the millennials. This kid, in 30 minutes of me and the board member talking, figured out how to parry stun lock the Rainmaker, killed him, got to the second boss, found a bug where you're able to get back out and go to the healing well, and then beat both bosses on his last try. This within 30 minutes of him playing the game for the first time. But I think player motivation is the big differentiator. And then there's like 3 major levers we can pull, I believe, for our game that can get this more east or west. And they are our art direction, our audio direction, and our narrative, right? And Clark is responsible for the west for both. And the reason Clark is responsible for them and not me is because my partner very long ago said, when we started, he said, Rob, you are too Chinese. You cannot objectively, I'm paraphrasing, you can't objectively look at your Western player. What Clark and what our marketing manager Chase and what GC2, our business director, represent are our Western players. And so obviously our core development team is almost all Chinese, but Clark's job and Chase's job is to look at our game and say, is this Western enough to be appealing to me? Right. And be objective about that. And then play testing. But for our game, the difficulty is one big difference. And then how we implement and we can go into detail on this as you like, our art direction, our audio direction, and our narrative, which obviously want to go to narrative because we have a narrative director here. But those are the levers that you can find common ground, and you can pull these levers in different. It's not a binary thing. It's coming up with creative. We believe you can come up with creative solutions. There's been this historical belief. There's like kind of a binary of like, okay, it has to be this. I had a friend I met at DICE, wonderful guy who I think Clark's gonna have coffee with, but it was a binary. He was working with Japanese folks. On like a Japanese game and trying to make it appealing to Westerners. There was like a lever you pull between traditional Japanese and whatever modern elements or Western elements you want to put into it. I personally don't believe it's a binary. I think you can find creative solutions on whatever product map you want to visualize. For example, we can go into our art style, whatever, but I think we can discuss at length how you can thread the needle on making things that appeal to both. But that's how I think of it.
Well, I want to actually jump to Clark because, as you were talking, things were coming to mind for me. Avatar, The Last Airbender, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Hero. There have been things that have come in sort of both directions that have had success. Like Avatar, greatest selling. Oh, Hero's an amazing movie. Avatar is the most profitable movie of all time, and when you look, I think it's is it above 70s, like 73% was non-domestic, because usually they just always evaluate those things from a U.S. perspective. It was huge around the world. It was gigantic, I believe, in China as well. And again, it was like a I think it was like $2.7 billion movie or something like that. So anyway, yeah, Clark, how are you thinking about this? How are you thinking about that difference as you try to figure out the levers and market to the Western and kind of help manage that creatively?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think so. When I first got hired, as Rob has basically said, I basically got hired for like my ignorance of Chinese culture. I was brought in to be the counterweight. And so I think I stepped into an environment where the philosophy was like, we need someone who doesn't know about China, and that if you're too familiar with China and once you learn about it, then you won't be able to be objective and make something that appeals to the West anymore, which I really kind of disagreed with from the start and still disagree with. I think Chinese stories are amazing. And, obviously you just listed off a few. There's more, less commercially successful, but like Days of Being Wild or whatever. Like there's these beautiful movies, and I've always actually kind of loved them. And the difference between the stuff where you're like, oh, that's too Chinese, or like, I love that movie, is really just whether you followed along. That's my perspective. It's like the emotion, the human experience, all of that, it's going to be there one way or the other. It's like, was I able to understand why the characters felt the way they did and why they made the decisions they did? So I really just think that's the job. It's like it's writing a Chinese story. I've done, at this point, insane amount of research into Chinese history and mythology. So you've got these stories and these characters who've resonated with people for thousands of years. And it's just, okay, how do I make sure that resonates with, with an American player? But I don't think that gap is actually that huge. It's just, it's just doing the job of making sure the logic is all there.
Hey, leaders and game devs, if you love what we do here at Building Better Games, imagine what we could create with your support. By joining our Patreon, you help us bring deeper insights, develop better training, and host more expert discussions to level up your leadership and game development skills. Plus, as a patron, you're going to get exclusive behind-the-scenes content, early access to episodes, and a chance to ask your burning questions directly to us. Join now and help us build better games together. So, I want to ask then a question, especially to you, Clark, because one, I hear you basically saying, story is story, emotions are emotions. If people can follow something compelling, that they understand it, it can pull them along, and that's why Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was so breakthrough. It wasn't because there was never a good movie before that just did well. No one designed the movie so it would appeal to West. It was like, no, but it is because the way this was written, the movie actually is very little exposition. And in the same way that I just watched like The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2, and it's fascinating to see just some of these classic, brilliant movies where they didn't need exposition, where they you are sort of slowly pulled into this story, and you're 20 minutes or 30 minutes in, you're like, I want to know what happens to these people. and like, so you're hooked, and then you watch all the way through. And while I think as a Westerner watching Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, whenever that came out so long ago, now you could tell there was like Chinese themes in this, not just like, oh, it was clearly made in China and that sort of thing, but that like some of how they viewed the spiritual realm was different than like a stereotypical Western experience. But that didn't negatively impact how I was relating to, like you said, the emotion. So the counterpoint to this, my counter question then is like, wait a minute then, if what we need is story that can be followed and we can get hooked on, why is this so rare, and why do some people consider it either impossible or just insanely difficult, not even worth attempting?
Yeah, I mean, I think story is hard. I imagine it's a lot like it's a lot like what musicians go through. We've all consumed 10 million stories and listened to 10 million songs in our life, but very few people have actually tried to sit down and write a story or a song. And when you do that, you realize like, oh yeah, I have a lot of opinions and I have taste and I can tell you what's good and bad. But like the skill it requires to make good art is, it's tough. It's really tough. So I think, when you get into a commercial environment and there's timelines and there's pressure and, you're trying to make money, then you say, okay, well, I know what I can do well and what I can do fast. And maybe that's catering to this one audience or the other. But I don't think it's like an impossible puzzle to solve. And we've started from the beginning with the idea that like, this is our goal. This is what we're trying to solve. This is the problem. So we've put our time and our resource and our creativity towards it. And so far, I don't see any indication that we're like fighting a losing battle here.
Mm-hmm. So for you, it's just people haven't been trying to solve it really. Like they focused elsewhere. And, if I'm making like a game for a Western audience, even if I wasn't consciously doing that, I just like rapidly sort of pick that audience and go for it. I don't even try. I don't worry about the other thing. And so I don't ever get the success that might come from hitting both.
For sure. Because I mean, I think as any writer will tell you, like you can spend just an unlimited amount of time creating something. But when you need deadlines, right? Because otherwise you're always just, there's always something to fix and whatever. But once you have deadlines, then you kind of have to move out a little bit from that like pure artistic mode and into a more practical mode, and you write with instinct. Yeah. And your instincts are going to be the things you've grown up with and the things you consume. And yeah, it's just even me jumping from writing screenplays to games. I think a big change I had to realize was like, okay, my instinct is to put all the catharsis into cutscenes. That's where I'm comfortable. Write this from where I control everything, and like I'm in control of the story here, and we're doing it. It's gonna be the way I want it. But then it's at a certain point, I was like, oh no, that's not the job here. The job is to make the gameplay the most important thing. So I'm writing this wrong. But yeah, no, I think when there's deadlines and stand-ups and you're in a business environment, you revert to kind of what you know. And again, we've started this project with the idea of, okay, what we need is this cross-cultural story that needs to appeal. Yeah, it needs to appeal broadly. And so if your instincts are taking you in a direction that's too heavily weighted one way or the other, then you need to reevaluate.
Yeah. Rob, what you got?
Yeah, Ben, can I, thanks for bringing up this topic, Clark, but I have like this like philosophy that I've been mulling for like the past like 2 years as I started the studio. And that's that I think that creativity requires constraints. And what I mean by that is like, okay, you look at Japanese philosophy, like, haiku, and there's this art style in Japanese where you get one brush stroke, right? And the beauty is not necessarily in the results. The beauty is in understanding the constraints of the process and what someone was able to do with one brushstroke, right?
Yeah.
That's the most extreme example. But in game development, and I got a pretty unpopular probably philosophy for a lot of your listeners, but like I believe that paying studios too much, giving them too much time, giving them too many resources actually destroys the creative process. So for our studio, for example, and I'm giving away some internal whatever, but like, look, we weren't funded for the first 15 months of our studio, right? It was me and my partner paying out of pocket for a lot of things, not taking paychecks, right? That immediacy and that pressure caused us to get good. GIT space GUD, right? So as I view myself as the business creative, right? I had to create the fundraise and all that kind of stuff. But like when it comes to game development creativity, right? I worked at AAA, and I would say that our team works 9 times faster. And there's obviously this isn't apples and oranges, but I think we work 3 times faster and cost 1/3 of a traditional Western development. So I'd say 9 times faster, or what have you. The constraints of time and of resources sharpens the minds of everyone on the project, and results in more productivity, more creativity, more innovation. And obviously this is not to, I don't want to go extreme here and say like the meetings will continue, but like, I believe the future model of studios is high salaries and not thinking of it as a project-based industry has been a real problem for the West, where you treat your job as a going concern. You have a high salary, so you're comfortable. I call it, Clark said this many times, like the devs are in their cocoons in the West, and they just want to shade the upper lip of, the orcs for 8 hours a day. And this is obviously a stereotype, but I think the future of our level of game development, which is, we're not going to be a big team. We're never going to be a big team. If our first game's a success, we'll come up with a new model besides expanding FTE ad infinitum. Is everyone needs to own in the success. Everyone needs to own the pain, as it were, of the creative process, right? If you want to own your own intellectual property, if you want to start something new, in Chinese, the phrase "sure cool" means like to eat bitters. Like, you have to be willing to eat bitters. And we're working in the passion industry, and you pay a passion tax. And I think that to go back to creativity is bred, I think, by constraints. I think our studio would have, if we can go into the financing model, if you'd handed my studio $5 million to start, we would not be nearly as far along as we were. We probably would have had a lot more personnel and leadership issues if you just handed me $5 million when I started this company. So I hope that, I know I went in my way through a lot of that, but no, creativity requires constraints.
I think, and I think one of the things that happens, and the reason this sometimes isn't popular, is there is I've talked about this analogy before. Actually, I had this in a book called Just Reading Scripture with Western AAA. It's a fascinating book, but I pull this analogy all the time. The author talks about this idea of there's a road with 2 ditches. And you want to stay on the road, and there's a ditch that you tend to know about and be cautious about falling into. And oftentimes what will happen is, like, imagine you're biking down this road and you're like, I definitely don't want to be in that ditch. And you don't realize that you're totally stuck in the other ditch. And so there's a ditch here that I think we have pendulum swung away from in the West, which is unbelievable crunch, overwork, inhumane conditions, leading to like family breakdowns and mental breaks, and people just burning out of the industry as a whole, and just going like, I'm going to go write code for, Chase Bank because I never want to touch anything creative ever again, because that was the worst, sometimes 9 months, years of my life where I was just working constantly. And so there's this extreme side where we did push all of our devs to, as an industry, to the point where we became famous for that style of crunch. EA had the whole big, there was a big drama about that some number of years ago. And a lot of studios will speak back to these times, like these death marches. And some of those death marches resulted in successful games. Many of them did not. And so you just burned a bunch of people out, and then you didn't succeed, and they were getting paid less than, tech industry standard at the same time. And so there's a ditch there, and we're wary of that ditch. And I think that's wise, because exhausted people are not as effectively creative. Now there's a ditch on the other side of the road, and I think it's the one that actually a lot of places did fall into. And especially when games as a service became successful, live service models started printing money for some of these major studios, and they realized they could either through sequels or expansions, or just through like regular content releases in an MMO or a MOBA or something like that, we're just pulling in money. Well, now I can just give you unlimited time. Don't worry. You don't have to worry about crunch. Work the hours you want to work. Be as creative as you want. The money's going to keep flowing in. And we just want you to make sure you build the right thing. And some of them went a step further and even said, let's assemble our best possible people and put them on these teams and give them massive budgets. And what I find interesting is pretty much all of those are failures. Best people with unlimited budgets and like unlimited time put in a room together. You rarely see a big success come out of that. And if you do, I was actually closer to some of these than I'll talk about in detail. But when you do, what actually usually ends up happening is at the end, someone has to come in, put constraints on the project to actually get it out the door. And I remember working like I can say this, one of the teams I was working on, I remember there were people on the team and they were working, it was an artist and they were working on a texture and they just kept working on this one texture and they worked on the texture for a week and 2 weeks and 3 weeks and 4 weeks. And I finally told that artist, because there were a lot of textures that needed to get done, if you don't stop working on that texture and start working on other textures, I'm going to find a way to copy paste that texture everywhere in the game. Because and that actually made sense based on what we were doing. Because I was just like, we can't have you just continuing to detail this thing. Like we are going to run out of time to do everything else. And that got them moving, but it was a fascinating, like they were so focused on what I would say was extreme diminishing returns in the value curve work that they were doing. And that's where constraints come in helpful, because they force you to cut early rather than late around a diminishing returns curve and to understand that stuff. So anyway, everything you're saying resonates with me massively. And I think we are trying to walk that ditch between not exhausted, burned out, fried studios creating mostly failures, and also not, the best in the business with unlimited budgets, given unlimited time, just frittering away money for years and then having it all sort of fall apart in the end, or needing somebody to come in and actually like put some constraints on it to get it out the door. So I'm a big fan. Like I think throughout history, you see the creativity, like you talked about, even Nietzsche talked about the idea of like, be careful about removing all suffering from your life, because when you do, what is your motivation for forward?
I think it's 100% that you see it all the time, of people working on a script for years, and there's always this thing. It's like, okay, well, Uncut Gems, it took them 10 years to write it, blah 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 blah. But like at the same time, like if you never put anything out, then you're not making anything. So it's obviously a strange thing, but at some point, art has to meet commerce. And you need it, but also I think from a creative perspective, it's good, because of course you never want to release it until you feel great about something, because you end up putting a lot of yourself in it and there's like a vulnerability to it and you want it to be bulletproof. But also I want to iterate, and if I'm stuck on something and I just get mired down into it, it actually does sap my creativity, because one, you start to have a weird relationship with the thing you're working on and you kind of like end up hating it. But two, you're not iterating. So I think the power kicking things out of the nest early, as you said, Ben, is something that every creative should realize earlier rather than later.
So actually, this is something I want to segue in. Unless either of you wanted to jump in on that, I wanted to segue into talking about the game.
Yeah.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was very grateful. Rob sent me an early version of the game. I got to play with it in half an hour. I was not beating all the bosses and finding a hack to heal myself, but I did jump in. I like kind of went over, did some of the conversation with the first couple of NPCs you run into, and then started going in. And I would say I had like a positive experience with the game overall. I would also say like this might not be the game for me, but I thought it was beautifully done. And I was like, wow, there's actually like the puzzles that I'm trying to solve here through the enemies is pretty cool. And also the fact that I died, so I got to try again a couple times, and that it was a roguelike. That there was like this element of, oh, I got a different weapon this time. Oh, how do I use that? How does that work? How do I do? And I started doing stuff like that. And like, okay, well now, like, let me go see if I can explore more of the world to see what kind of cool weapons and gear and things like that. Like I mentioned earlier, like I beat the first boss with the gun was the one. And I tried a couple different things. And I tried controller and mouse and keyboard. You had both; they were both working. And what was surprising to me, perhaps seeing it was, man, if anybody takes this in a negative way, I don't intend it that way. It was a simple thing to walk into and start playing. Like the menu was very simple. I got into the game. I started moving. I moved through like the mural. I guess kind of how you get into the game. And then I was just in and I was fighting stuff. And I was impressed. I thought it was smooth. It played like it was supposed to. There were some like edge case, like little bugs here. But there, like outside of, some little tweaks like that again are going to be ironed out as this thing gets developed. It was a really clean experience. And I was like, this feels like it could be a compelling game, with like cool little enemy types. The bosses seemed pretty good. They were harder. Like you said, they were hard. This isn't my style of game, like I said. So I felt like I'm just failing as a gamer right now as I play this. The Rainmaker's kicking my butt, but it was good. And so anyway, I appreciated the opportunity to play it, especially before I talked to you, because it gave me like a concrete idea. Now, Rob, I know you want to talk about like actual, like what it costs to get there, in terms of time and people and whatnot. I don't know what you can share and what you can't share, but it was an impressive, that's an impressive demo. Like that's an impressive demo.
So I'm gonna emotion dump here because it's been 2 years of me developing this in stealth. And then like, let's say 14 months of a really consolidated team working on this. And this is the third iteration of, we spent like 3 or 4 months coming up with 2 previous iterations of our art direction, because we thought that the art direction was the most important thing to get right from the start. And I'm very grateful. Number one, Ben better than anybody that a lot of this is kabuki, putting like, the holding up the puppets ahead. There's a lot of stuff that's behind the scenes that we just stitched together just in the last 3 sprints. But just, man, these guys and gals can really put together something. The analogy I've given Clark from the start is like, okay, every milestone, we're taking the car apart and we're like polishing all the pieces. And then there's like 2 weeks of, to spend getting in the war room and putting everything back together and bug smashing. And man, those last 2 weeks of productivity toward this milestone were just something to see. Our UI went from nothing to, it looks like a game UI. Yeah, I'm very grateful for that. Just for reference for everyone, I'm not going to go into the dollars per se, but we've had, let's say, average 14 to 16 FTE equivalent devs. Now we're up to about 20. We're a very lean team, a lot of contract, a lot of part-time collaborators. But the core team all come from a AAA unannounced Soulslike. And we have a gentleman from Monster Hunter. So from the start, when we first started this project, I was never worried about the fundamental moment-to-moment gameplay, the combat. I was never worried about it. I was worried about the art direction, the kind of like long tail, like what defines this as a roguelike versus others, like permanent progression and other systems. But as you know, Ben, we're almost to our vertical slice. We're going to have a vertical slice build for GDC, but let's say another month and a half to get to our vertical slice. You have to get the fundamentals down for a vertical slice. And our fundamentals were almost demonstrated everything. And getting to vertical slice and taking a step back, when Ash and I started this project, we knew, and now it's, by the way, DICE, everybody's now acknowledging, you got to get to vertical slice on your own before the institutions, the industry are going to take you seriously. They need to be able to look at something that they can understand. And they also need to be able to put something in front of a player that a player can assess, right? And also, a vertical slice proves that your team can make the game. I feel very gratified the last few weeks and kind of feel my oats here, because Western institutions and individuals like yourself can play the game and say, okay, I know what they're going for, and it's clear they can make the game. I hope I didn't just miss.
No. I think, but I mean, I remember, because you did talk a little bit about like total cost, even there, just that many FTEs over this period of time. It's impressively done. Like it's an impressive, I could see people spending a lot more time getting not nearly as far. I have seen people spending a lot more time with a lot more people getting not nearly as far. And that speaks probably to that, your philosophies around, the constraints inside the system, but also there's a vision for what this thing is, at least that I seemed to feel as I was playing it, of like, oh, this is what, okay, I know what I'm doing now. And like the first time I had even one of the Because one of the challenges you always run into in those is like, what's the depth and sort of the meta progression elements of some of this stuff? And like, how am I thinking about it? How is it different each time? And I ran into one of these little stone altar things, and it gave me like, hey, 3 options. Does like poison do more damage, or does, do you get health back when you, or like 1% health back when you kill something, or like, whatever. There were these 3 options. And I was like, oh, well, and I started like, what weapons do I have? What's my gear? What, like, how, okay, cool. Let's talk about like, and let me just select this. And now I realize that once I make that choice, that is now going to impact the rest of my run. And I will also say this, you went with the painterly art style.
And I'd actually like, because I can dump on this all day because this has been 2 years pent up of, I'll do one thing, being stealth for 2 years, right? In the video game industry, Ben, I know a lot of people at Blizzard that worked on projects for years and years and years, and they just get canceled. And you have no idea. I have friends who worked at Riot in your R&D department, and like,
yeah,
I don't know what they did. They'll never tell me what they did. Who knows, right? If this thing didn't get funded, it would have just ended, and then it would have been that. And to finally get to the point where I can share with the industry, and hopefully before the end of the year, we're still figuring out our go-to-market exactly. We're going to announce to the world our game. And to get to that position, especially within the studio and a new IP that you and your team formed, I could go on for an entire conversation about that. But man, it feels pretty good, frankly. And I've been very grateful that Clark is a friend, and joining us has been there as kind of like keeping us. A lot of this stuff's like keeping everybody motivated because you don't get a lot of feedback until you get to verbal. This, Ben. Like our art director approves every single piece of content we share with the world. Right?
Yeah.
Know how important it is for these people. They don't want to show works in progress because it doesn't show their true intention. Clark, I'm sure it feels the same way about a lot of his writing. But we're finally to the point where we're kind of collectively, and we're going to announce before this podcast comes out, our studio, a lot of our game assets are going to be, at least concept art is going to be on our website. To get to that point where we're finally able to share, and Ben, this, like, we were fine to, I don't know if we showed you a picture of our kind of cover art of our protagonist, the face.
Mm-hmm.
To watch our art director Chiu Jan get from our initial concepts to there, it's been such a journey, and I geek out.
It's actually going to move over because I think one of the things when you're making an asset, there's 3 in games. This is an oversimplification, but there's 3 layers you want to get right: your design, your art, and your story. And you can call the last one narrative if you want, right? But and so you have these 3 elements, and different games, depending on your genre, are going to stack them in different ways in terms of priority. So, like when I was working on League of Legends, design is king, and then art needs to support design, and then we want it to be good art as well. And then story, because of the nature of the game of League of Legends, is the thing that will support both of those. But if no one ever interacts with the story or the narrative outside of hearing the VO, we're not offended, right? There's a lot of players who aren't going to go and read bios and read little stories and stuff like that. They're just going to play the game. That's fine. There are other games like Take a Journey or God of War, something like that. The story is king. And now I need to make sure that some version of like, maybe I stack it differently. I stack story as the most important thing, the narrative, I think actually, Naughty Dog does games like this. Where the story is king. The most important thing is we're taking them through the story, and we need to sell that narrative. And then I use design as a way to make sure that they're interacting with that story in a way that like feels good to them, that fits within the narrative of the world. And then I have art there as well. And so, maybe they did narrative, design, art as their stack. And so for me, like Clark, maybe the question to you is, as you're even thinking about this vertical slice or this initial demo that's going out, like, how are you thinking about your role as narrative in that stack? And how do you integrate with the art and the design and these sorts of things?
Yeah. So I think, one, I did before it was years ago actually, but I did like a game writing masterclass to kind of, see how I could transfer my writing skills into games. And one thing I learned through that was that the narrative is, for the most part, going to be 3rd or 4th kind of in like the hierarchy, and you are going to be more in a more supportive role than you would be in screenwriting or writing a novel or whatever.
Sure.
I came into the game expecting that, and I think that has been true, especially in a roguelike. Like, I don't know, I'm a story guy, but when I was playing Hades, I ended up skipping through a lot of the dialogue stuff, just because I think the nature of the game is you're running around and you're button smashing and you're hacking and slashing, and then you get to this moment of like reading a block of text, and your brain is just not wired for that at all.
Yeah. Yep.
Our format is not going to be a Naughty Dog, basically an interactive movie. But we've been trying to come up with innovative ways to make sure that we don't lose story, and that the story is kind of presented in a way that you don't have to go from a huge adrenaline fight to reading a block of text. So we're incorporating, we're calling it crosstalk, which is based on a Chinese form of stand-up comedy, which is similar to kind of like our old vaudeville acts, Abbott and Costello or Laurel and Hardy. And so there will be two NPCs basically commenting, similar to like you for FIFA or a Madden game, on the play, on your play as you're going through, but then also giving lore and some backstory and whatever, filling in the gaps basically. So kind of like when you have hopefully that we have a captive audience as the players are playing, and we're able to still kind of deliver some of the rich world that we're creating through osmosis as they're going through and hacking and slashing, which has been it's not something you really see ever, so it's had its own challenges of like, okay, well, this is a really funny little repartee between our commentators, but also like you're in the middle of a big fight. Like, does this work? Is it appropriate? So it's been its own kind of, we feel a bit like pioneers and like we're trying to figure out how to make this thing work, but it's been fun, and hopefully it's a differentiator. Like you see it and you're like, oh, okay, I know where I'm going with this, or I know it gives you some directionality. So it's wonderful for me. I think it's great. It's, it gives me a bit of a sandbox to play in, and then I get to do my thing and be creative and come up with the weird thing you weren't expecting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, like I said, it felt like it came together, because that's ultimately that thing of, as you look at that, however you stack them, you want the design, you want the art, you want the narrative to blend. Like to the player, they don't think about it. This is three distinct elements. It's just all there, and it's all the summation of the experience that they have.
If I can interject a little bit on the art versus narrative, before Clark was hired, like when so we're on story number 5. There was my crappy story that's on Substack of when oh, by the way, if anybody wants to see how the fundamentals of the studio I envision, they can go look on my Substack on my.
Nice. We'll put that in the show notes.
Thank you.
We'll put your Substack in the show notes. Yeah.
Like, I don't want to talk. I'm not going to talk specifics about how I convinced Ash and his team to leave their last project, but essentially Ash told me to go make a pitch for him, and I spent 3 months making that pitch. And so everybody can see the fundamentals of all of our different elements, and they've all morphed greatly. But the story initially, because of the team's background, I was like, oh, we should make a dark fantasy, like a darker. The analogy I gave was like, okay, if Sekiro and Elden Ring are like really dark and Hades is like really light, Hades is a Shakespearean comedy. I want to make a Shakespearean tragedy, right? So like Dante, a little bit like Dante's Inferno maybe, but like slightly, anyway, point is the tone of our story was something that was debated from the very start. And our art direction, like Cho Jan, our art director, if you look at our early concepts, they were a lot darker than they are now. Dark, I mean like violence, darker palette. I can't speak art, but
yeah.
Clark and Cho Jan for the past year, and Ash, our creative director, have been sort of pulling back and forth to get a unique tone, which then informs the art and the narrative. And the art direction has been a collaboration. Really, Clark has contributed heavily to how the art style has manifested, because we are not a dark fantasy. So we're a departure from, you think AAA Soulslikes, they're usually really dark, right? Our game is not that dark, but it's also not Western. It's not Hades, right? It's not, there's no consequences to anything. So everybody's kind of whimsical. Like that's not exactly
Zelda Breath of the Wild type. Like,
well, just inherently with the roguelike, right? You get the Groundhog Day. I mean, like my partner's favorite human on the planet's Bill Murray. He wears Ghostbusters hoodies to half our meetings. Like Groundhog Day is the original roguelike, right? And your response to the absurd of like restarting and going again, oftentimes people become cynical, or they become like humorous. Like Hades was clearly a take on we're gods, we can't die, so everything's kind of fun and whatever, right? We did not want that, right? But there is a response, a human response to repeating everything all the time, right? So Clark has been really finding that tone, and then that has in turn informed the pull of our game from originally kind of a dark fantasy art style to this painterly East meets West kind of thing. I can't articulate it. I wanted to make that known.
Yeah.
I can't do without some humor. I just think like why, you're like, it's humor is such a big part of life. Well, why would you ever cut that out of any story you're ever telling? And it doesn't have to be a huge, broad slapstick comedy, but like, if you're just too dark and everything is too sad and dreary, then it becomes intolerable. So yeah, I think I did inject like a bit of humor when I came on. And again, it's not like a comedy, but like I said, like the crosstalk is based in like a stand-up comedy style, so there's elements there. And hopefully we're giving you everything. We're giving you a lot of heartbreak, a lot of demented, oh my God, what is that creepy thing? And then we're giving you some laughs too. So yeah, the art did meet me in the middle in that sense, I would say.
That's awesome. Dude, this is like I said, it was coming together for me, at least when I was playing through the demo. It was an enjoyable blend of those things, and I didn't mind. Sometimes you can get annoyed by an announcer. I wasn't annoyed by the two people commenting. They're like talking as I was going over me as I was going through, and I thought actually there's a lot of potential there. So now I want to talk about like, it is not easy running a game studio. Rob, I have no doubt that you've been up pretty late a lot, maybe is a way to say it, over the last several years. Clark, you've probably been doing that some amount in the last year since you've been there. We were talking about like, hey, it's good to stay not exhausted, and simultaneously, like, I run a small business with what I do here, and I'm not even making a game. I'm just trying to like make training material and consult and stuff like that. It's tough. It's exhausting. You've gotten to that point now where you got a game out. What's the biggest challenge that you see facing your studio?
So I'll take the fundamentals of our studio is trust. So this entire collaboration from the start has been, the foundation was my relationship with my partner, Ash. Now it's a relationship of the board and of the key directors of the projects, and really an extension to everybody. But building and maintaining that trust is really the biggest challenge of our studio. And you maintain the trust through, your risk tolerance when it comes to starting something with a co-founder, right? Raising the money, forming the business plan, compromising on certain things. So the trust has been the thing that's the hardest thing to build and maintain at a studio. But I'm sure people in the West can relate. But when you're doing cross-cultural collaborations where, you're building this corporate structure and stuff, requires a lot of trust, right? That has been my primary rule at the whole company, is essentially a trust factor, right? I brought Clark onto the project, introduced him to Ash. I'm not just bringing, like, my job is to bring people together to establish trust. And that's been, I think, my job since the studio started, because I handed over, in our founders agreement, I handed over total creative control to Ash, in perpetuity. I obviously, people are going to ask me for my opinion, but I think that's necessary when you're doing something. You need to have clear, I don't want to call it a dictator, but like, you need to have someone who's kind of in charge of the vision, I think, especially if you're building a game like ours, which is, inspired in large part by some Eastern producers and creatives.
Well, there's a military principle too, the unity of command.
Yeah, yes. Obviously, okay, we could do an aside real quick here. People talk about military and the video game industry, and I think military are a clear. There's analogs I think of every day when I'm working in a studio. Studio to me is a ship. I worked on ships. Okay, in the studio you got engineering, you got design, you got art, you got audio, you got support, right? On a ship, you got ops, you got navigation, you got engineering, you got IT, you got deck department, right? All of them have to work seamlessly together or you don't go anywhere, right? And so I view my role as like an executive officer on a ship, right? I think they're very similar. You and I could go to that length, but as far as what are the challenges facing our studio now? Well, we formed the initial capital, and I'm silent online about our capital because my angel told me a long time ago, he's like, look, when you talk about money and fundraising online, you're just going to bring a lot of, he calls them time thieves. Maybe it's a little hard, but like I'm quiet about our money online because I don't think there's any benefit to talking about it. But we formed the way I envisioned the fundraising for the company was we needed to raise our seed round to get to vertical slice. Then from the vertical slice, we'd raise our Series A, or whatever you want to call it, to get to market, right? We're in the process. My primary duty is to form the capital to get to market. So that's my challenge. But I'm already looking beyond that. I mean, I'm not trying to be whatever, but I'm pretty confident we're going to form the capital to get to market. Now the biggest challenges for me, and I'm constantly, I think you can relate to this, Ben. I'm constantly Peter principling, like, okay, I started a studio. Like, what am I doing? Okay, I raised, okay, we got the vertical slice. Okay, now immediately, and I can, like, we finished our seed January 31st. And the analogy I give, Clark can relate, is like, I Mario Kart hopped and, like, right trigger, whatever is it, handbraked, and like going 90 degrees the other way. Now it's really a go to market strategy, right? We're looking beyond the next fundraise to what's the best way for us to go to market. And in this environment, there are no right answers, Ben. Like, I think you can relate is the traditional ways of thinking of go to market have all blown up, right? Now that there's direct distribution with Steam, now that how you reach your target customer is very different. I think that when I first started the studio, I was looking at Hades as like the mold of how to go to market, self-published, community, massive communication, early access. We're now actually internally debating if we're even going to do an early access, or if we'll do an early access constrained to China per se. And then we do like a demo, and then like the go to market is what's going to keep me up at night now, because the thing about development. So I posited the company as like 2 steps that I had to prove to our investors. The first is, can you make the game? And Ben, I'm very grateful because you answered the first question. Yes, we can make the game. Now the question is, can we market the game? And the problem with marketing, Ben, is that there's like never enough. There's never a right answer. Everybody can always pick. The only way to prove you can go to market is if you've gone to market before. Is like, I'm a corpo that's been grafted into a studio. I worked at studios at Activision, but I'm a corpo, right? The people that I interact with and speak the language of are the people that are at DICE, right? I'm giving the 13 slider business pitch decks with the graphs and the nice little bubbles. So my role at a studio is constantly changing. I mean, people ask me what I do all day, all the time. And so my job's changing. And so initially it was, okay, I got to get the money to get this thing off the ground, right? Now we still got it. You always got to raise money until you get revenue. But now it's very much, okay, what's my old executive officer in the Navy was like, what's the alligator closest to the boat, right? And shoot that alligator, right? That's my job, is essentially to look for the alligators and shoot them. But man, I can't, the behemoth of going to market, and there's as many opinions as there are people on LinkedIn about how you go to market. Yeah. And they're very strong. That's the thing about the video game industry is everybody's got really strong opinions. And we can go into detail on this, but like, I don't look necessarily for strong opinions. I look for strong opinions that someone's actually bet on, that someone's actually gone in on. And then I follow that. So for example, I have great respect for Hooded Horse and what they've done. Yes. I still have yet to talk to Tim Bender. I've tried, hey, Tim, let's get a call. But I'm looking at people, there's a guy, Bertram, I think, the guys that are doing Half Sword. I don't know if you played Half Sword, Ben. I recommend Half Sword. It's still free. It's just like made by a few devs. It's like a high physics. Okay. Just go play Half Sword. But I'm looking at novel approaches to how we market this thing in the West. And the unfortunate thing is, in China and Japan, East Asia, we're going to partner probably with, there's a way you go to market in China and Japan that I'm gratefully not needing to worry about. But the West, there are no good answers today, US, EU, Western world, how to go to market for a AAA, AA title. So we've got to just basically do it on our own. We got to figure it out.
Yeah. I could go into a lot of different stuff there, and I won't, just for the sake of time, because Clark, I want to talk to you. Where is your biggest challenge? Like, where as the person who's sort of in charge of that narrative direction, the guy brought in because he doesn't know China and is simultaneously writing a story in both, for a Chinese and an English audience simultaneously, or a Western, I guess, audience simultaneously. Like, what's the challenge you see?
Yeah, you've kind of set me up for like a 1,000-foot view answer, but I'm going to answer much closer to the game. It's that dialogue crosstalk thing that I was explaining before. Mm-hmm. mind in saying that it didn't bother you in the demo, but in the demo it's really clunky, and that's fine. That's just like where we are in the stage of implementing it. But the demo is really clunky. It's AI voices. I don't think it like proved that it works. So for this vertical slice version, I would like it to prove that it works. So that is, and we've come up with a kind of hierarchy of types of comments and different lengths and a system of how they'll integrate and who takes priority when and where, depending on what happens. But so, yeah, the next month or so, it is then, I'm sure it'll take longer than that, but whenever we're sprinting, it is figuring out how to make that really good so that when you're playing it, it is a feature and it's not something you're going into the settings and trying to figure out how to shut these guys up.
Yeah.
I really do think it's going to work. It's just in this process of like, okay, let's make it work. And then kind of just alluded to there, it is just from like a labor standpoint is going to take a lot of writing to have new versions for the 80th run and making sure that it doesn't become super repetitive. Because listen, hey, that's our game, right? You have to do the same thing over and over and over again. So like, how do you make the when you tens of hours or more? Yeah.
First game to release an expansion pack that's nothing but new VO lines. And everybody's like,
yeah.
Yeah. But okay, so we're almost out of time. So I wanna ping you both. I got two different questions for you. Rob, I'm gonna hit you first. And that is, what should leaders in game dev know to help them adapt? Like if you were to look at leaders in game dev, because that's the audience I'm hitting with this podcast, hopefully. Like if you were to give leaders advice as they move forward, and some of them might be on teams, some of them might be leading studios, some of them might be doing startups, some of them might be, corporate talking heads or whatever, corporates like yourself or whatever. But like, what's the advice you would give to them, seeing the changes that are happening and trying to stay current with that?
I mean, that's super broad, so I'll try to just give a super broad response. And that's, okay, why did Ash partner with me? He told me, he's like, I partner with you because you really understand games. You really understand our user. You really understand what you're trying to make, right? Leaders in games, this is self-serving. I can't do design. I can't do art. I can't code. I can't create almost any content, right? I can support content creators. I know what they're doing. But look, you have to have love for your player and love for the people that make stuff for those players, right? I don't know how to animate, but like I watch enough and read enough about animation to appreciate my animator, to give him at least someone in the ballpark good feedback, right? I don't know anything about programming at all, but like, just yesterday we were talking about the mini map, like we're implementing mini map, and I know enough about mini maps that I can like intelligently give commentary to my gameplay programmer. That none of them are looking to me for like actual implementation advice. But if you're a leader in games, you even more so than having, I would say, technical skills, having like, I don't want to use the word empathy, but like loving your product, loving your core users, and loving the craft of your team members, it just goes such a long way to building trust. And that the trust in game dev, I think trust is the fundament of game dev. I think that we put all these levers of salary and all these things in place. But look, everybody is in this industry taking a passion tax. And on the other side, 4 or 5 years ago, there was the argument that the passion tax is dead, right? It is not dead because there is exogenous things to the model of supply for game development where anybody could pick up Unreal Engine and start doing it, and people love games. So the number of people that want to work in games will always greatly exceed the number of people that can work in video games sustainably, right? And so if you're not willing to pay that passion tax, right, and lead people who are paying that passion tax, like what are you doing in this industry, right? Like honestly, what do you go? You can make more money doing something else. Like be willing to pay the passion tax for your players, for your product, and for your devs.
Love it. Clark, different question for you. You've just made the jump from entertainment, the broad entertainment industry, into games specifically. So I don't doubt that you're like just drinking from the fire hose in terms of how all this works and what is good and what isn't. Like you said, you took a master class about game writing and all these different things. What advice would you give to somebody who might be considering moving into game development from outside of it? Like, what are things that, like, oh, some of it was intuitive and it made sense, but some of it was not, and I was surprised by it. Like, what would be the tips or advice or, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think I kind of touched on it for a second before when I talked about like my instinct is to write for cutscenes because that was like what I knew. But I would say if you're thinking about making the jump, one, do it because I think it's a great industry. It's a growing industry. It's kind of where entertainment is headed. But but two, I think the thing you don't really realize is how important gameplay is. Gameplay is king. Specifically, if you're coming from the narrative side, the player controls so much of the story, even in games that aren't open world where you have a ton of dialogue options or this or that. Like, just the way you choose to play the game as a player changes the narrative, right? You could be going around killing everybody, and that colors who you are and what your experience is, or the character's experience, right? It could be your 100th try and you finally beat this boss, and that is so much more cathartic than if you had just beaten him so simply in the first one, right? Like everything changes just on like the player's own experience. So you have to know that. You have to keep that in your head, and I think you have to be writing with a mindset that like, okay, how do I make this so that it's tailored for the best gameplay experience possible? And it's like a subtle shift. Like in my day-to-day writing, it's not like I'm doing something tremendously different than I would be otherwise, but it is a significant shift in I think how you have to approach things.
Cool.
So yeah.
Nice. All right. With that, I want to give both of you the opportunity. Anything to plug? Just for the audience's info, we're recording this in late February, which is wild that we're already in late February.
Yeah, I'll give a plug to what I'd like to favorably compare our game to, like we talked about before the podcast, of Moon Studios' No Rest for the Wicked. I've been playing a lot of that game since it came out, and I've learned a lot for our studio from that game. And what I'm most impressed by with No Rest for the Wicked is you have a team that made Ori and the Will of the Wisp, or whatever, like a 2D platformer, massively successful. And the co-founders of that studio decided, again, Mario Kart, Handbrake, take a 90-degree turn, and make an isometric 3D Souls-like action role-playing game. And No Rest for the Wicked, it's a truly experimental game. Like, you can argue about some of the implementations and some of the, like we at the studio analyzed a lot of it, but I'm so impressed by that studio's risk taking that they did with that game. So if you haven't played No Rest for the Wicked yet, I think if you're working in the game industry, there are a lot of just experimental takes that game took that are worth absorbing by playing it for No Rest for the Wicked.
Cool. And then we'll also throw in something for your LinkedIn if you're good with that. We'll put your Substack in as well. And then also if Rising Tide's website should be up, we'll make sure to get a link to that down there as well.
Yeah.
Clark, from your side, anything you want to plug?
No, I only do paid endorsements. No, honestly, not really. I would plug the rest of the team because I think, really Ash should be on this podcast. His leadership and just his experience in the industry is unbelievable. Same with our art director. Really everyone down the line. It's been an amazing experience being able to work with these people. They're just true professionals and so creative and amazing.
Cool. All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you both. I appreciate the time. This has been super cool. Hope people get a lot out of it. Cheers.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I want to do a quick summary of that episode. So first, the classic moats protecting Western game dev are fading away. Perhaps the only one remaining is IP. I don't think we're taking that seriously enough. And I think it's going to come back to bite us in the United States and Europe in the future. Might be already. Second, teams take time to figure each other out. You can't rush this, and expecting a brand new team to nail their first product is asking for trouble. This comes up again and again and again, both on this podcast and other conversations I have. Third, the standard rules that people have of what you can and can't do are worth challenging, or at least thinking about and discussing. Don't let outdated ideas limit what you attempt. People will justify the things they want to be true, and sometimes they're very compelling about that, but that doesn't make them right.
Fourth, story and emotion are common to all humans, but there are differences we can see in player motivations depending on region. Western players tend to be pretty evenly split across a set of motivations, while many Eastern players prefer challenge and competition strongly. Fifth, succeeding in creative spaces is hard, full stop. It makes sense why so often we go towards something more known, the things we're comfortable with, whatever that might be, when we feel like we need to succeed in these spaces. Sixth, constraints are part of almost all successful creative endeavor. You can't view any limitation as a problem for succeeding creatively. Well-designed constraints can be the catalyst of success, not a barrier. Seventh, trust is a foundational element of any successful studio. Leaders should be focused on building and developing trust between everyone at a studio. To fail to invest here is to go into massive debt that a new studio is unlikely to get out of. Eighth, as a leader in game dev, you need to understand the player and the games around it, and the players around it. If you aren't doing that, if you don't love the player and have the ability to empathize with them, you will make decisions that hurt the game you're supposed to be helping to succeed. Ninth, never forget what's most important. In games, it might be gameplay. And that means that making great art or amazing marketing plans or whatever else, if it comes at the cost of gameplay, may not be worth it. Remember what is paramount for your game to succeed. All right, that wraps us up. Thanks.